The clock on the wall showed 11:30 at night. The mathematics building was quiet and empty. All the students had gone home hours ago. All the professors had left their offices. The only sound was the squeak of wheels rolling down the long hallway. A man in a blue uniform pushed a cleaning cart slowly past the classroom doors. He was the night janitor. His name tag was faded and hard to read. He had been working this job for 3 years now. Every night was the same. He came to work when everyone else went home. He cleaned the floors. He emptied the trash cans. He wiped down the desks. Then he went home before the sun came up. The janitor liked working at night. It was peaceful. No one bothered him. No one asked him questions. No one really looked at him during the day either. To most people, he was invisible. He was just the man who cleaned the building. Nobody knew anything about him. Nobody asked. He moved from room to room with his mop and bucket. His hands were rough from years of cleaning. His back hurt a little from bending over all night, but he never complained. He needed this job. His family needed the money. That was all that mattered. The janitor reached room 301. This was Professor Whitmore's classroom. The professor taught advanced calculus here. The janitor always cleaned this room last because it took the most time. Students left papers everywhere. They dropped pencils on the floor. They spilled coffee on the desks. But tonight something was different. The janitor pushed open the door and looked inside. The lights were still on. That was strange. Usually the professor turned off all the lights before leaving. The janitor walked into the room and looked around. Then he saw the chalkboard. His feet stopped moving. His eyes went wide. The entire board was covered with writing. Numbers and symbols filled every inch of space. The janitor moved closer. He forgot about his cleaning cart. He forgot about his mop. All he could see was the chalkboard. At the top of the board, someone had written in big letters, "Extra credit, solve by Friday." Below that was a mathematical equation. It was long and complicated. The janitor recognized it immediately. It was a differential equation, a very difficult one. But that was not what made him stop and stare. Below the equation were dozens of attempts to solve it. Someone had tried many different ways. Lines of work covered the board. Some were crossed out. Some had question marks next to them. Some just stopped in the middle as if the person had given up. The janitor knew who had written all this. It was Professor Whitmore. The professor's handwriting was easy to recognize. He had seen it on the boards many times before. The professor always stayed late working on problems. Sometimes the janitor would see him in his office at midnight, still writing equations on paper. But this problem seemed different. The professor had clearly been struggling with it. The janitor could see the frustration in the crossed-out lines. He could see how many times the professor had started over. This was not a simple problem. This was something that had stumped even a brilliant mathematics professor. The janitor stood in front of the board for a long time. He did not move. He just looked at the equation. His mind started working automatically. He began to see patterns in the numbers. He began to understand the structure of the problem. Years ago, the janitor had been very good at mathematics. Better than good, actually. He had been exceptional. He had studied at one of the best universities in the country. He had solved problems that made other students give up. Professors had told him he had a gift. They said he would do great things, but that was a long time ago. That was a different life. Now he was just a janitor. Now he cleaned floors and emptied trash cans. Nobody knew about his past. Nobody knew what he used to be capable of doing. The janitor looked at his watch. It was almost midnight. He should finish cleaning and go home. His wife would be waiting up for him. His daughter had school in the morning. He needed to get home and get some sleep, but he could not stop looking at the equation on the board. His mind kept working on it. He kept seeing different approaches, different techniques, different ways to solve it. He knew he should just clean the room and leave. This was not his problem to solve. He was not a student. He was not a professor. He was just the janitor. This equation had nothing to do with him, but his feet would not move. His eyes stayed fixed on the chalkboard. The numbers seemed to speak to him. They seemed to call out to him. It had been so long since he had done real mathematics, so long since he had solved a real problem. He missed it more than he wanted to admit. The janitor looked around the empty classroom. Nobody was there. Nobody would see him. He could just look at the problem for a few minutes. just to see if he could figure it out, just to exercise his mind a little bit. Where was the harm in that? He walked slowly to the front of the room. He stood right in front of the chalkboard. The equation stared back at him. It was challenging him, daring him to try. The janitor's hand reached out. His fingers touched the chalk sitting in the tray below the board. The chalk felt strange in his hand. He had not held chalk in years. He had not written an equation in years. His hands were used to holding mops and brooms now. Not chalk, not pens, not the tools of mathematics. He picked up the piece of chalk. It was small and white. A little piece of dust fell from it onto the floor. The janitor held it between his fingers. His hand remembered how to hold it. Muscle memory from years ago came back to him. He stood there holding the chalk, looking at the equation, thinking. His heart was beating faster now. His mind was racing. He could see the solution. It was right there. He knew how to solve this problem. He knew the technique that would work. It was unconventional. It was not the standard approach, but it would work. He was certain of it. The janitor looked at the door. The hallway outside was dark and empty. Nobody was coming. Nobody would know. He looked back at the equation. His hand moved closer to the board. The chalk was just inches from the surface. Should he do this? Should he write the solution? What would happen if someone saw it? What would they think? Would he get in trouble? Would he lose his job? But the equation kept pulling at him. His mind had already solved it. The solution was complete in his head. All he had to do was write it down.
Just put it on the board.
Show the steps. Share what he knew. The janitor took a deep breath. Then he made a decision. His hand moved forward. The chalk touched the board. And he began to write. The chalk made a soft scratching sound against the board. The janitor's hand moved steadily across the surface. He wrote the first line of the solution below all of Professor Whitmore's crossed-out attempts. His handwriting was clear and neat. Each number and symbol was perfectly formed. He worked slowly at first. His hand was not used to writing mathematics anymore. For 3 years, his hands had only pushed mops and carried trash bags. But now as he wrote, something inside him woke up. It was like a part of his brain that had been sleeping suddenly opened its eyes. The janitor did not need to think hard about the solution. It came naturally to him. He saw the problem in a way that was different from how the professor had approached it. The professor had tried to solve it using the standard methods. Those methods were good, but they made this particular problem very complicated. There was a simpler way, a more elegant way. He wrote the second line, then the third. Each line flowed from the one before it. The solution was like a story. It had a beginning, a middle, and an end. Each step made sense. Each step brought him closer to the answer. As he wrote, the janitor forgot where he was. He forgot about the time. He forgot about his cleaning cart waiting by the door. He forgot that he was just supposed to be cleaning this room. All he could think about was the mathematics. The beautiful, pure mathematics. His hand moved faster now. The chalk flew across the board. Numbers and symbols appeared like magic. He used a technique he had learned years ago in graduate school. It was not a common technique. Most people did not know about it. But it was perfect for this type of problem. It turned something complicated into something simple. The janitor stepped back to look at what he had written. He checked each line carefully. Mathematics had to be perfect. One small mistake could ruin everything. He looked for errors. He checked his work. Everything was correct. He nodded to himself and continued writing. Minutes passed. The janitor filled the empty space on the board. His solution grew longer, but unlike the professor's attempts, his solution was organized. It was clean. There were no crossed-out lines, no false starts, just a clear path from the problem to the answer. He wrote the final steps. The equation simplified. Terms canceled out. The answer emerged like the sun coming up in the morning. The janitor wrote the last line and put down the chalk. He stepped back and looked at the complete solution. It was done. The problem was solved. The janitor felt something he had not felt in years. Pride, satisfaction, joy. He had solved a problem that had stumped a calculus professor. He had done mathematics again. Real mathematics. For just a few minutes, he had been more than a janitor. He had been what he used to be, what he had trained to be, what he was meant to be, but then reality came back. He looked at the clock on the wall. 20 minutes had passed. 20 minutes of writing on the chalkboard. 20 minutes when he should have been cleaning. He was behind schedule now. He still had 3 more rooms to clean before his shift ended. The janitor looked at what he had written on the board. Suddenly he felt afraid. What had he done? This was not his classroom. This was not his chalkboard. He was not supposed to write on it. He was only supposed to clean it. What would happen when Professor Whitmore came in tomorrow morning? What would the professor think when he saw this solution? Would he be angry? Would he think a student had broken into the classroom? Would there be an investigation? The janitor reached for the eraser. He should clean the board. Erase everything he had written. Pretend this never happened. Go back to being invisible. Go back to being just the janitor. His hand touched the eraser. But then he stopped. He looked at the solution again. It was good work. It was correct. It answered the question that Professor Whitmore had been struggling with for days. Maybe the professor would be happy to see it. Maybe it would help him. But who would believe a janitor had solved it? Nobody knew he had studied mathematics. Nobody knew about his past. They would never believe the cleaning man had written this solution. They would think it was impossible. The janitor stood frozen, holding the eraser. He did not know what to do. Erase it or leave it, hide what he had done or let someone see it. He thought about his life. He thought about all the years he had spent being invisible. All the years of cleaning floors while brilliant students and professors walked past him without seeing him. All the years of staying quiet about who he really was, about what he could do. Maybe it was time to stop hiding. Maybe it was time to let someone see. Just this once. The janitor put down the eraser. He would leave the solution on the board. Whatever happened tomorrow would happen. He could not control it. But at least he had done something true tonight. He had been himself. Even if just for 20 minutes he picked up his cleaning supplies. His hands were covered in chalk dust. He wiped them on his uniform. White streaks appeared on the blue fabric. Evidence of what he had done. The janitor cleaned the rest of the room quickly. He mopped the floor. He emptied the trash can. He wiped down the desks. But he did not touch the chalkboard. He left the solution exactly as he had written it. When he finished cleaning room 301, he pushed his cart out into the hallway. He closed the door behind him. Through the small window in the door, he could see the chalkboard. The solution was still there. White chalk on the dark green surface. The janitor moved to the next classroom. Then the next. He finished his work for the night. But his mind kept going back to room 301, to the equation he had solved, to the decision he had made to leave it there. At 2 in the morning, he clocked out. He walked to his old car in the parking lot. The campus was dark and quiet. A few streetlights lit the paths between buildings. The janitor sat in his car for a moment before starting the engine. He wondered what tomorrow would bring. Would anyone notice the solution on the board? Would Professor Whitmore see it? What would happen then? Part of him wished he had erased it. It would be safer that way. Easier. He could go back to his invisible life with no questions asked. No attention drawn to himself, but another part of him was glad he had left it. For 3 years he had walked through this building in silence. He had seen equations every night and solved them in his head. But he had never shared his solutions. He had never let anyone know what he could do. Tonight was different. Tonight he had left a mark. A small piece of evidence that he was more than what people saw, more than just the janitor. He started his car and drove home through the empty streets. His wife was asleep when he arrived. His daughter was asleep in her room. The house was quiet and peaceful. He took off his uniform and got ready for bed. As he lay in the darkness, the janitor thought about the equation. He could still see it clearly in his mind. He could see every line of his solution. He wondered if Professor Whitmore would understand the technique he had used. He wondered if the professor would appreciate the elegance of the approach. Sleep did not come easily. His mind was too active. It had been awakened after years of rest. Solving that equation had reminded him of who he used to be. It had reminded him of what he had given up. The janitor had left MIT 15 years ago. He had been in his final year of doctoral studies. His dissertation was nearly complete. His professors had high hopes for him. They said he would make important contributions to mathematics. They said he had a brilliant future ahead of him. But then his wife got sick. Very sick. Cancer. The medical bills were enormous. The insurance did not cover everything. He had to make a choice: continue his studies or take care of his family. It was not really a choice at all. He left school. He took whatever jobs he could find, jobs that paid immediately, jobs that did not require a finished degree. He worked in warehouses. He worked in restaurants. He worked as a security guard. Finally, he became a janitor. His wife survived. The treatment worked. She was healthy now. Their daughter was growing up strong and happy. He had made the right choice. He knew that. He would make the same choice again. But sometimes late at night he wondered about the life he might have had, the mathematics he might have contributed, the problems he might have solved, the students he might have taught. Tonight, for 20 minutes, he had touched that life again. He had been a mathematician again. Not a janitor, not invisible, but someone who could solve difficult problems, someone with knowledge and skill and talent. The janitor finally fell asleep as the first light of dawn appeared in the sky. His dreams were filled with equations and chalkboards and the satisfying feeling of finding a solution to a difficult problem. He did not know that tomorrow would change everything. He did not know that leaving that solution on the board would make him visible in ways he could not imagine. He did not know that Professor Whitmore would arrive early tomorrow morning and see what he had written. He did not know that his life was about to transform completely. For now, he just slept, with chalk dust still under his fingernails and a small smile on his face. Professor Whitmore arrived at his office at 7:30 in the morning. This was earlier than usual, but he had not slept well. The equation from room 301 had kept him awake most of the night. He had tried to solve it at home. He had filled pages in his notebook with different approaches. Nothing worked. The professor was frustrated with himself. He was supposed to be an expert in calculus. He had been teaching it for 20 years. He had published papers in mathematical journals. Students came from other universities to study with him, but this one equation had defeated him for 4 days straight. He had found the problem at a mathematics conference last week. Another professor had presented it as an example of a particularly challenging differential equation. When Professor Whitmore saw it, he thought he could solve it quickly. He was wrong. He had spent hours on it, days. He had tried every technique he knew. He had consulted his textbooks. He had reviewed his old notes from graduate school. Nothing helped. The equation remained unsolved. Finally, yesterday, he had written it on the board in room 301. He told his students it was extra credit. Maybe one of them would see something he had missed. Maybe a fresh pair of eyes would find the solution. But deep down, he doubted it. If he could not solve it, how could a student? Professor Whitmore walked down the hallway carrying his leather briefcase and a large cup of coffee. The building was mostly empty this early in the morning. A few graduate students were in the library. One other professor was in his office. That was all. He reached room 301 and unlocked the door. He pushed it open and stepped inside. He was planning to look at the equation one more time before his first class. Maybe this morning, with a fresh mind, he would see something new. But when he looked at the chalkboard, he froze. His briefcase almost slipped from his hand. His coffee cup shook and a little bit spilled onto the floor. He did not notice. There was writing on the board. New writing. Below all his failed attempts from yesterday, someone had written a complete solution to the equation. Professor Whitmore could not move. He could not breathe. He just stared at the chalkboard. His brain tried to understand what he was seeing. Someone had been in this room. Someone had seen his problem. Someone had solved it, but who? When? How? He walked slowly to the front of the room. He set down his briefcase and coffee cup on the desk. His hands were shaking. He moved closer to the board until he was standing right in front of the solution. Line by line, he read through the work. His eyes moved carefully over each step. His mind checked every calculation. He looked for mistakes. He looked for errors. He found none. The solution was perfect. Absolutely perfect. And it was brilliant. Whoever had solved this equation had used a technique Professor Whitmore had not considered. It was an approach he barely remembered from his own graduate studies. An unconventional method that most mathematicians did not use. But for this particular problem, it was ideal. It simplified everything. It made the complex problem manageable. Professor Whitmore felt his heart beating fast. This was not just a correct solution. This was an elegant solution. A beautiful solution. The kind of solution that only came from someone with deep mathematical understanding. But who had written it? He looked at the handwriting. It was not the handwriting of a young student. The letters were too careful, too practiced. This was someone who had written mathematics for many years. Someone experienced. He pulled out his phone with trembling fingers. He needed to tell someone about this. This was too important to keep to himself. He called Dr. Vasquez, the chair of the mathematics department. "Elena," he said when she answered. His voice was shaking. "You need to come to room 301 right now. Something impossible has happened." "What are you talking about?" Dr. Vasquez asked. She sounded confused and a little annoyed. It was very early in the morning. "Just come, please. You need to see this." 20 minutes later, Dr. Vasquez walked into room 301. Professor Whitmore was still standing in front of the chalkboard. He had not moved. He had been reading and rereading the solution, making sure he was not dreaming. "What is so important that you called me at 7 in the morning?" Dr. Vasquez asked as she entered the room. Professor Whitmore pointed at the board. "Look." Dr. Vasquez walked over and looked at the chalkboard. She read the equation at the top. Then she saw the solution below it. Her eyes went wide. "Did you solve it?" she asked. "No," Professor Whitmore said. "That's not my handwriting. Someone else wrote this. Last night after I left." Dr. Vasquez moved closer to the board. She was also a mathematician. She could understand what she was looking at. As she read through the solution, her expression changed from confusion to amazement. "This is excellent work," she said quietly. "This technique, I've only seen this approach used a few times, and never so well." "I know," Professor Whitmore said. "Whoever did this is exceptional." "But who?" Dr. Vasquez asked. "None of your students could solve this. I know because you told me on Monday how difficult it was. That's what I thought too. But someone did solve it. Someone was in this room last night." Dr. Vasquez pulled out her phone. "I'm calling security. We need to check the building's camera footage. We need to find out who was in here." While they waited for security to arrive, 2 other mathematics professors came to room 301. Word had spread quickly. Professor Whitmore had sent a photo of the solution to a colleague. That colleague had sent it to someone else. Now everyone wanted to see it. The professors stood in front of the chalkboard like people standing in front of a painting in a museum. They studied the solution. They discussed the technique. They were all impressed. Some were jealous that they had not thought of this approach themselves. "Whoever solved this has serious talent," said Professor Chen, who taught graduate-level courses. "This is not undergraduate work. This is doctoral-level thinking, maybe beyond." By 8:30, a crowd had gathered outside room 301. Graduate students heard the news and came to see what was happening. Other faculty members from different departments arrived. Everyone was curious. Everyone wanted to know who had solved Professor Whitmore's impossible equation. The head of campus security arrived with a laptop computer. She had reviewed the security footage from last night. She set up her laptop on the desk at the front of the room. "I checked all the cameras at the building entrances," she said. "Only one person entered the mathematics building after 5 p.m. yesterday. The night janitor. He came in at 11 p.m. like he always does. He left at 2 a.m. Professor Whitmore frowned. "The janitor? That's impossible. There must be someone else. Maybe someone came in through a window or a side door?" "All the other doors were locked," the security officer said, "and all the windows are secure. I checked everything. The janitor was the only person in this building between 5 p.m. and 5 a.m. Dr. Vasquez shook her head. "But the janitor is just—" "He's the janitor. He cleans the floors. He empties the trash. He doesn't solve differential equations." "Are you sure about the footage?" Professor Chen asked. "Absolutely sure," the security officer said. "Look, I can show you." She turned her laptop screen so everyone could see. She played the video from the entrance camera. At 11 p.m., a man in a blue uniform walked into the building pushing a cleaning cart. The image was clear. It was definitely the night janitor. The room fell silent. Everyone was thinking the same thing. It was impossible. A janitor could not have solved this equation. Janitors did not study advanced mathematics. They did not use unconventional techniques that even professors barely remembered. It made no sense, but the evidence was clear. Only the janitor had been in the building. Only the janitor could have written the solution on the board. "We need to talk to him," Professor Whitmore said. "We need to find him and ask him about this." Dr. Vasquez nodded. "I'll call the custodial services office." They can tell us his schedule and how to contact him." She stepped out into the hallway to make the call. The professors and students stayed in the room, still staring at the chalkboard. They talked quietly among themselves. Some thought there must be a mistake. Maybe the janitor had let someone else into the building. Maybe a student had hidden in the building and solved the equation after everyone left. But Professor Whitmore did not think so. He looked at the solution again. He looked at the handwriting. Something about it seemed genuine, real. Not the work of a young student trying to impress a professor. This was the work of someone who truly understood mathematics, someone who had studied it deeply, someone who loved it. Dr. Vasquez came back into the room. "I spoke with the custodial supervisor. The janitor's name is on file, but they don't know much about him. He's worked here for 3 years. He's quiet. He does his job well. He never causes problems. He's scheduled to work tonight starting at 11 p.m. "Tonight?" Professor Whitmore said. "We have to wait until tonight?" "We could call him at home," Dr. Vasquez suggested. "The supervisor gave me his phone number." "No," Professor Whitmore said. "We should wait. If we call him now, it might scare him. He might not come to work tonight. Let's wait. Let's talk to him when he arrives for his shift." The others agreed. They would wait. They would be patient. But it was hard. Everyone wanted answers. Everyone wanted to know how a janitor had solved one of the most difficult differential equations Professor Whitmore had ever encountered. As the morning went on, more people heard about what had happened. Students talked about it in the cafeteria. Professors mentioned it in their classes. By lunchtime, it seemed like everyone on campus knew the story. The janitor had solved an impossible math problem. The campus was buzzing with excitement and disbelief. Professor Whitmore spent the whole day thinking about it. He taught his classes, but his mind was elsewhere. He kept returning to room 301 to look at the solution. Each time he read it, he was more impressed. This was truly exceptional work. Who was this janitor? Where had he learned mathematics? Why was he working as a cleaner if he could solve problems like this? Tonight, Professor Whitmore would get his answers. Tonight, he would meet the mysterious person who had solved his equation. Tonight, the campus would finally learn the truth. The janitor woke up at 3 in the afternoon. This was normal for him. He worked nights, so he slept during the day. He got out of bed and looked out the window. The sun was shining. It was a beautiful autumn day. He had no idea that the campus was talking about him. He had no idea that professors and students were gathered in the mathematics building discussing the solution he had written. He had no idea that his life was about to change completely. The janitor made himself lunch. His wife had gone to work. She was a nurse at the local hospital. She worked the day shift. Their daughter was at school. She was in 5th grade. She loved reading and science. She wanted to be a doctor when she grew up. As he ate, the janitor thought about last night. About the equation. About the solution he had written. He wondered if anyone had seen it yet. He wondered what they would think. Part of him regretted leaving the solution on the board. It was risky. It drew attention to himself. And he had spent 3 years trying very hard to stay invisible. To be just another worker that nobody noticed. But another part of him was glad he had done it. For once he had been himself. For once he had done what he was good at. It felt good. It felt right. The janitor finished his lunch and got ready for work. He put on his blue uniform. He packed his dinner in a bag. He kissed his wife goodbye when she came home. Then he drove to campus. He arrived at 10:30, 30 minutes before his shift started. He always came early. He liked to have a cup of coffee in the break room before starting work. It helped him wake up and prepare for the long night ahead. As he walked across campus toward the mathematics building, he noticed something strange. There were more people around than usual. Small groups of students stood talking. They looked excited about something. A few professors walked quickly between buildings as if they were in a hurry. The janitor thought maybe there was some kind of event happening. Sometimes the university had special lectures or presentations in the evening, but this felt different. There was an energy in the air, a feeling of excitement and anticipation. He entered the mathematics building through the back entrance. This was the entrance the custodial staff used. It led directly to the break room and supply closets. He swiped his ID card and pushed open the door. The custodial supervisor was waiting for him in the break room. Her name was Margaret. She had worked at the university for 15 years. She was a kind woman who treated all her workers fairly. The janitor liked her, but today Margaret looked worried. She stood up when he walked in. "We need to talk," she said. The janitor felt his stomach tighten. Something was wrong. Had he made a mistake last night? Had he forgotten to clean something? Was he in trouble? "Okay," he said quietly. "What's wrong?" Margaret shook her head. "I don't know if anything is wrong. But some professors want to talk to you. They've been asking about you all day." The janitor's heart started beating faster. They knew. Somehow they knew he had written the solution. "What do they want?" he asked. "They wouldn't tell me," Margaret said. "But they asked about your background. Where you're from. How long you've worked here. I told them what I know, which isn't much." "You keep to yourself," the janitor nodded slowly. He did keep to himself. He never talked about his past. Never mentioned his education. Never told anyone about MIT or his unfinished doctorate. It was easier that way. Less complicated. "They want you to go to room 301, Margaret continued. "Professor Whitmore is waiting there. He said it's important. He said you're not in trouble, but they need to ask you something." Room 301. The classroom where he had written the solution. They had found it. They had seen what he did. Now they wanted answers. The janitor sat down in a chair. His hands were shaking a little. He had known this might happen. But knowing it and experiencing it were two different things. "Do I have to go?" he asked. Margaret looked at him carefully. "No, you don't have to do anything. But I think you should. Whatever this is about, running from it won't help." She was right. He knew she was right. He could not hide forever. And part of him did not want to hide anymore. Part of him wanted to be seen, to be recognized, to stop being invisible. "Okay," he said. "I'll go." Margaret smiled. "Good, do you want me to come with you?" The janitor shook his head. "No, thank you. I need to do this alone." He stood up and walked out of the break room. His legs felt weak. His heart was pounding. He walked down the hallway toward room 301. Each step felt heavy. He could hear voices coming from the classroom. Multiple people were in there, waiting for him. As he got closer, he saw a crowd gathered outside the classroom. Students, professors, people he had never spoken to before. They were all talking quietly. When they saw him approaching, they fell silent. They moved aside to let him pass. They stared at him. The janitor felt like he could not breathe. So many people, all looking at him, all wondering who he was, what he could do, why he was just a janitor. He reached the door of room 301. Through the small window, he could see Professor Whitmore standing by the chalkboard. Dr. Vasquez was there too, and several other people he did not recognize. The janitor took a deep breath. He raised his hand and knocked on the door. The room went quiet. Professor Whitmore walked to the door and opened it. He looked at the janitor. Their eyes met. "Please come in," the professor said. His voice was gentle. Not angry, not accusing, just curious. The janitor walked into the room. He heard whispers from the people in the hallway. The door closed behind him. Now it was just him and the professors. Professor Whitmore gestured toward a chair. "Please, sit down." The janitor sat. He kept his eyes down. He did not want to look at the chalkboard. He did not want to see the solution he had written. "My name is Professor Whitmore," the man said. "I teach calculus here. This is Dr. Vasquez, the chair of our mathematics department. We have some questions for you. But first, let me ask you directly. Did you write that?" He pointed to the chalkboard. The janitor finally looked up. He looked at the board. The solution was still there. His handwriting, his work. His moment of truth from last night. He could lie. He could say no. He could say he did not know what they were talking about. He could walk out and never come back. Find another job. Continue being invisible somewhere else. But he was tired of lying. Tired of hiding. Tired of pretending to be less than he was. "Yes," he said quietly. "I wrote it." The room was silent for a moment. Professor Whitmore and Dr. Vasquez looked at each other. Then back at him. "How?" Professor Whitmore asked. "How did you solve this equation?" "I've been working on it for days. My colleagues have looked at it. Nobody could solve it. But you did. In one night." The janitor did not know how to answer. How could he explain? How could he make them understand? "I saw it on the board last night," he said slowly. "When I was cleaning, I looked at it, and I knew how to solve it. But where did you learn this technique? Dr. Vasquez asked. She moved closer. She was not angry. She was fascinated. This method you used. It's not commonly taught. Even most doctoral students don't know it. Where did you study mathematics? The janitor felt his throat tighten. This was the question he had been afraid of. The question that would reveal everything. That would expose his past. His failures. His abandoned dreams. MIT, he said finally. I studied at MIT 15 years ago. The professors looked shocked. MIT? Professor Whitmore repeated. You studied mathematics at MIT? I was in the doctoral program, the janitor said. His voice was barely above a whisper. I was in my final year. Working on my dissertation. What happened? Dr. Vasquez asked gently. The janitor closed his eyes. The memories came flooding back. The hospital. The fear, the bills. The terrible choice he had to make. My wife got cancer, he said. Stage 3. The treatment was expensive. Very expensive. I had to leave school. I had to work. I had to take care of my family. The room was completely silent now. No one spoke. No one moved. I took whatever jobs I could find, the janitor continued. Jobs that paid right away. I worked in warehouses. I worked in restaurants. Eventually, I ended up here, cleaning floors in a mathematics building. The irony is not lost on me. Professor Whitmore sat down in a student desk. He looked stunned. You've been working here for 3 years? Yes, 3 years. Cleaning these rooms, walking past these chalkboards every night, seeing the equations. And nobody knew. Nobody asked who you were, what you could do. Nobody asks janitors about their past, the janitor said. We're invisible. That's how I wanted it. It was safer that way. Dr. Vasquez sat down too. She was trying to process everything she was hearing. A doctorate student from MIT, working as a janitor for 3 years, in their own building, and they had never known. Your wife? She asked. Is she? She survived, the janitor said. A small smile appeared on his face. The treatment worked. She's healthy now. We have a daughter. She's 10 years old, smart, wants to be a doctor. That's wonderful, Dr. Vasquez said. I'm so glad she recovered. But your studies, did you ever think about going back? Finishing your doctorate? The janitor shrugged. I thought about it. But by the time my wife was better, too much time had passed. My advisor had retired. My research was outdated. My connections were gone. How could I go back? I was just a janitor now. No, Professor Whitmore said firmly. He stood up and walked over to the janitor. You are not just a janitor. You solved an equation that I couldn't solve. You used a technique that most mathematicians don't even know. You have a gift. A rare gift. And it's been wasted for 3 years because nobody bothered to see you, to really see you. The janitor looked up at the professor. He saw something in the man's eyes. Respect, admiration, recognition. What's your name? Professor Whitmore asked. The janitor told him his name. It felt strange. For 3 years, people had only called him the janitor or hey you. His actual name had not mattered. But now it did. Now he was not invisible anymore. Professor Whitmore extended his hand. It's an honor to meet you. A true honor. The janitor stood and shook his hand. He felt tears in his eyes, but he blinked them away. What happens now? He asked. Professor Whitmore looked at Dr. Vasquez, then back at the janitor. What happens now is that we figure out how to fix this situation. How to help you get back to where you should be. I don't understand, the janitor said. Dr. Vasquez stood up. You belong in this building as a mathematician, not as a janitor. We need to make that happen. The janitor shook his head. It's been too long. 15 years. I can't just go back to school. I have a family. I have bills. I need to work. We'll figure it out, Professor Whitmore said. Give us some time. Let us see what we can do. The door opened. More professors walked in. They had been waiting outside. They wanted to meet the janitor who had solved the impossible equation. They wanted to shake his hand. They wanted to ask him questions. The janitor felt overwhelmed. All these people. All this attention. For 3 years he had walked through this building like a ghost. Now everyone wanted to talk to him. Everyone wanted to know his story. A young woman stepped forward. She was a graduate student studying mathematics. Can I ask you something, she said. How did you know to use that technique? The one in your solution? The janitor thought about it. I saw the structure of the problem, he explained. The way it was set up. The standard methods would make it too complicated. But if you approach it from a different angle, if you transform it first, everything becomes simpler. The graduate student nodded, understanding. That's brilliant. I would never have thought of that. More questions came. The professors asked him about his research at MIT. What had he been studying? What was his dissertation about? Who had been his advisor? The janitor answered as best as he could. It had been so long since he had talked about mathematics with other mathematicians. So long since anyone had cared about his ideas. It felt good. Strange, but good. After an hour, Dr. Vasquez asked everyone to leave. Let's give him some space, she said. This is a lot to process. The professors and students left reluctantly. They wanted to keep talking. But they understood. The janitor looked tired, overwhelmed. When the room was empty except for Dr. Vasquez, Professor Whitmore, and the janitor, they sat down to talk seriously. Here's what I'm thinking, Dr. Vasquez said. We need to find a way for you to complete your doctorate. That should have been finished 15 years ago. You earned it. Life got in the way, but that doesn't mean it's gone forever. But how? The janitor asked. I can't afford to quit my job and go back to school full-time. My family depends on my income. What if you didn't have to quit? Professor Whitmore suggested. What if we could create a position for you here? Something that pays you while you complete your degree? Dr. Vasquez nodded. A teaching assistant position. Or a research assistant. Something flexible. You could take classes part-time, work on your dissertation, and still earn a salary. The janitor felt hope rising in his chest, but he pushed it down. He had learned not to hope too much. Would that even be possible? I left MIT 15 years ago. I don't have transcripts. I don't have recommendation letters. Everything is old. Let me make some calls, Dr. Vasquez said. I know people at MIT. We can get your records. We can talk to your old professors. Maybe we can transfer your credits here. Maybe you can complete your degree at this university instead. And in the meantime, Professor Whitmore added, you could audit some classes. Get back into the swing of things. See if you still love it as much as you did 15 years ago. The janitor sat quietly thinking. This was happening so fast. This morning he was just a janitor. Now they were talking about degrees and positions and teaching. It felt like a dream. I need to talk to my wife, he said finally. This affects her too. And my daughter. I can't make this decision alone. Of course, Dr. Vasquez said. Take your time. Think about it. Discuss it with your family. But please, think seriously about it. You have too much talent to waste. The world needs mathematicians like you. The janitor stood up. Can I go now? I still have work to do. Floors to clean. Professor Whitmore smiled. You're not seriously going to clean floors tonight, are you? I have to, the janitor said. It's my job. People are depending on me to do it. That's admirable, Dr. Vasquez said. But tonight, why don't you take the night off? Go home, talk to your wife. Think about your future. We'll handle things here. The janitor hesitated. He had never taken a night off. He had never missed a shift in 3 years. But maybe tonight was different. Maybe tonight he needed to think about something more important than clean floors. Okay, he agreed. Thank you. He walked out of room 301. The hallway was still crowded with people. Students and professors lined the walls. When he emerged, they started clapping. Slow at first, then louder. The applause filled the hallway. The janitor did not know what to do. He had never been applauded before. He nodded awkwardly and walked toward the exit. People patted his shoulder as he passed. They smiled at him. They treated him like he mattered. It was the strangest feeling. After 3 years of being invisible, he was suddenly the center of attention. He was not sure he liked it, but he did not hate it either. He left the building and walked to his car. The evening air was cool. The campus was beautiful with the autumn leaves changing colors. He had walked across this campus hundreds of times, but tonight it looked different. It felt different. The janitor drove home slowly. His mind was racing. Could this really happen? Could he really go back to mathematics? Complete his doctorate? Become what he had always wanted to be? But what about his family? What if going back to school meant less time with them? What if it meant more stress? What if his wife did not want him to do this? He pulled into his driveway. His wife's car was there. She was home from her shift at the hospital. The lights were on inside. His daughter was probably doing her homework. The janitor sat in his car for a moment. He took a deep breath. Then he got out and went inside. His wife was in the kitchen making dinner. She looked up when he walked in. "You're home early," she said. "Is everything okay?" "Something happened at work," he said. "We need to talk." His wife looked worried. She put down the spoon she was holding. "What's wrong? Did you get fired?" "No," he said. "Nothing like that. Something good happened. I think, maybe." They sat at the kitchen table. The janitor told his wife everything. About the equation. About solving it. About Professor Whitmore and Dr. Vasquez. About their offer to help him complete his doctorate. His wife listened without interrupting. When he finished, she was quiet for a long time. "You solved a problem that a professor couldn't solve," she finally said. "Yes. And they want you to go back to school." "Yes, they think I can complete my degree. Maybe work there while I study." His wife reached across the table and took his hand. "You never told me you still thought about mathematics." "I didn't want to burden you," the janitor said. "We had other problems. More important problems." "Your dreams are not a burden," his wife said firmly. "They're part of who you are. I always wondered if you regretted leaving MIT, if you resented me for getting sick." "Never," the janitor said. "I would make the same choice 1,000 times. You and our daughter are the most important things in my life." "I know," his wife said, "but that doesn't mean you have to give up everything else. If this is a chance to finish what you started, you should take it. But what about money? What about time? Going back to school means everything will change." His wife smiled. "Things have been changing for a long time. We just haven't noticed. Our daughter is getting older. She needs me less. I could work more hours at the hospital." "We could make it work. Are you sure?" "I'm sure," his wife said. "You saved my life 15 years ago. You gave up your dreams for me. Now it's my turn to help you get them back." The janitor felt tears in his eyes again. This time he did not try to hide them. He stood up and hugged his wife. She hugged him back tightly. Their daughter came into the kitchen. "Why are you both crying?" she asked. "What's going on?" The janitor and his wife looked at each other. Then they sat down with their daughter. They told her the story. About the equation. About MIT. About what might happen next. Their daughter's eyes got big. "You're really smart, Dad," she said. "Like really, really smart?" The janitor laughed. "I guess so. That's so cool," his daughter said. "Are you going to be a teacher?" "Maybe," the janitor said. "Someday, if I can finish my degree." "You should do it," his daughter said seriously. "You should follow your dreams." "That's what you always tell me." The janitor looked at his daughter. She was right. He had always told her to work hard, to study, to follow her dreams. How could he tell her those things if he did not do them himself? "Okay," he said. "I'll do it. I'll call Dr. Vasquez tomorrow. I'll tell her yes." His family cheered. They hugged him. They were proud of him, and he felt something he had not felt in a very long time. Hope. That night after dinner, the janitor sat at the kitchen table with a notebook. He started writing mathematical equations, problems he remembered from years ago, ideas he had never finished exploring. His hand moved across the paper. The numbers and symbols came easily. Like riding a bicycle, you never really forget. His wife watched from the doorway. She saw the expression on his face. Concentration, joy, peace. This was who he really was. This was what he was meant to do. She had married a mathematician 15 years ago. Then he had become a janitor. Now he was becoming a mathematician again. The circle was completing itself. As the janitor wrote, he thought about the future. It would not be easy. Going back to school after 15 years would be hard. Balancing work and study and family would be challenging. There would be moments of doubt, moments of frustration, but he was ready. He had spent 3 years being invisible, 3 years cleaning floors while brilliant minds worked above him, 3 years pretending to be someone he was not. Now it was time to be himself again. Time to step into the light. Time to show the world what he could do. The janitor smiled as he wrote. Tomorrow everything would change. But tonight he was just a man at a kitchen table doing what he loved. And that was enough. The next morning, the janitor called Dr. Vasquez. His hands shook as he dialed the number. This was real now. He was actually going to do this. He was going to try to get his life back. Dr. Vasquez answered on the second ring.
I was hoping you would call, she said.
She sounded happy. Have you made a decision? Yes, the janitor said. I want to try. I want to finish my degree. If you can help me. We will help you, Dr. Vasquez promised. Can you come to my office this afternoon? We have a lot to discuss. At 2 o'clock, the janitor walked into the mathematics building, but this time was different. He was not wearing his blue uniform. He was wearing regular clothes, jeans and a button-up shirt. He felt strange without his cleaning card. Naked almost. People recognized him as he walked down the hallway. Students pointed and whispered. Professors nodded and smiled. Everyone knew who he was now. The janitor who solved the impossible equation. The genius who had been hiding in plain sight. Dr. Vasquez's office was on the 3rd floor. The janitor knocked on her door. Come in, she called. He entered. Dr. Vasquez was sitting at her desk. Professor Whitmore was there too, and another man the janitor did not know. Thank you for coming, Dr. Vasquez said. This is Dean Morrison. He's the dean of the College of Sciences. He wanted to meet you. The dean stood and shook the janitor's hand. He was an older man with gray hair and kind eyes. I've heard remarkable things about you, the dean said. Dr. Vasquez showed me your solution. It's impressive work. Thank you, the janitor said quietly. They all sat down. Dr. Vasquez opened a folder on her desk. I made some calls yesterday and this morning. I spoke with the registrar at MIT. I explained your situation. They were very sympathetic. And? The janitor asked. His heart was pounding. They still have all your records, all your coursework, all your credits. Everything is there waiting for you. The janitor felt relief wash over him. He had been afraid that 15 years was too long, that his records would be gone, lost forever. But here's the situation, Dr. Vasquez continued. To complete your MIT doctorate, you would need to go back there. You would need to work with professors there. That's not practical for your situation. The janitor's heart sank. He knew it was too good to be true. However, Dr. Vasquez said with a smile, I have a better idea. What if you transferred your credits here? What if you completed your doctorate at this university instead? Can I do that? The janitor asked. Yes, Dean Morrison said. We've done it before. Students transfer from other doctoral programs occasionally. It's not common, but it's allowed. We would review your MIT coursework. Accept the credits. Then you would just need to complete the remaining requirements here. Which would be what? The janitor asked. Professor Whitmore spoke up. Some additional coursework. Not much since you're so advanced. And a dissertation. You would need to write and defend a doctoral dissertation. The janitor nodded slowly. A dissertation. That was a big project. It would take time. Maybe a year or more, but it was possible. It was actually possible. Now let's talk about the practical matters, Dr. Vasquez said. You need income. You need to support your family. We can't expect you to quit your job and become a full-time student. So here's what we're proposing, Dean Morrison said. We create a teaching assistant position for you. You would help Professor Whitmore with his undergraduate calculus classes, grade papers, hold office hours, help students who are struggling. It would be part-time, Professor Whitmore added, maybe 20 hours a week. That would give you time to take classes and work on your dissertation. And the pay? The janitor asked. He felt embarrassed asking about money. But he had to. His family depended on him. More than you're making now as a janitor, Dean Morrison said. Teaching assistants make a decent salary. Plus, you would get free tuition. You wouldn't have to pay for your classes. The janitor did some quick math in his head. If he made more money and did not have to pay tuition, his family would be okay. They could manage. It would be tight, but they could do it. When would this start? He asked. Next semester, Dr. Vasquez said. That gives you 2 months to prepare. To get your transcripts transferred. To register for classes. To get ready. What about my job? My custodial job? You would need to give notice, Dr. Vasquez said. But I've already spoken with Margaret, your supervisor. She understands. She's happy for you. The janitor felt overwhelmed. This was happening so fast. Yesterday he was a janitor. Today he was being offered a path back to mathematics, back to his dreams. I need to think about it, he said. I need one more night to be sure. Of course, Dean Morrison said. This is a big decision. Take your time. But please know that we really want you here, not just because you're talented, but because your story is inspiring. Our students need to see that it's never too late, that life can take unexpected turns, but dreams don't die. The janitor left the meeting feeling dizzy. He walked across campus in a daze. Students sat on the grass studying. Professors walked between buildings carrying stacks of papers. This could be his life again. This world of learning and thinking and growing. He went home and talked to his wife again. They discussed the details. The money. The time commitment. The changes it would mean for their family. I'm scared, the janitor admitted. What if I'm not good enough anymore? What if 15 years away from mathematics has made me rusty? What if I fail? His wife took his hands. You solved an equation that a professor couldn't solve. You're good enough. You've always been good enough. That night, the janitor could not sleep. He lay in bed thinking, remembering his time at MIT, the excitement of learning, the joy of discovering new ideas, the satisfaction of solving difficult problems. He remembered why he had fallen in love with mathematics in the first place. It was beautiful, pure, true. In a world of uncertainty, mathematics was certain. 2 + 2 always equaled 4. A theorem once proven stayed proven forever. He missed that certainty. He missed that beauty. He missed being part of something bigger than himself. In the morning, he called Dr. Vasquez again. I'll do it, he said. I accept your offer. The next 2 months passed quickly. The janitor worked his notice period. He trained a new custodian to take over his roots. He said goodbye to the job he had held for 3 years. On his last night of work, he walked through the mathematics building one final time. He looked at the classrooms, the chalkboards, the equations written by professors and students. He had cleaned these rooms for so long. Now he would be on the other side. Now he would be writing on those boards, teaching, learning, growing. He stopped at room 301, the room where everything had changed. The chalkboard was clean now. His solution had been erased weeks ago, but he would never forget it. That moment of courage when he picked up the chalk and wrote what he knew. That moment changed everything. The janitor turned off the lights and closed the door. He pushed his cleaning cart down the hallway for the last time. He felt sad and excited at the same time. He was leaving behind 3 years of his life, but he was moving forward to something better. When the new semester started in January, the janitor became a teaching assistant. His first day was nerve-wracking. He stood in front of a classroom full of undergraduate students. They were young, confident, smart. Professor Whitmore introduced him. This is our new teaching assistant. He's going to be helping with this course. If you have questions, you can come to his office hours. The students looked at him curiously. Some of them recognized him. The story of the janitor who solved the impossible equation had spread throughout the campus. It had even been in the university newspaper. One student raised her hand. Is it true you used to clean this building? The janitor nodded. Yes, for 3 years. And now you're teaching us? Another student asked. I'm learning alongside you, the janitor said. I'm finishing my own degree, but yes, I'm here to help you learn too. The students seemed to respect that. They saw him not as someone who had always had it easy, but as someone who had struggled. Someone who had faced obstacles and overcome them. Someone like them. Over the next few weeks, the janitor settled into his new life. He taught 2 discussion sections for Professor Whitmore's calculus class. He held office hours 3 times a week. Students came to ask questions. Some needed help with homework. Some just wanted to talk about mathematics. The janitor loved it. He loved helping students understand difficult concepts. He loved seeing their faces light up when they finally got it. He loved being part of their learning journey. He also started taking his own classes. 2 graduate seminars, one in advanced differential equations, one in topology. The classes were hard. He had to study every night. But his mind was sharp, sharper than he expected. The mathematics came back to him quickly. His classmates were younger than him. Most were in their 20s, fresh out of undergraduate programs, but they accepted him. They studied with him. They respected his insights. One of his classmates said, "You have a different perspective than us. You've lived more life. You understand mathematics differently because of it." The janitor thought about that. It was true. Mathematics was not just abstract symbols to him anymore. It was a tool for understanding the world. for solving real problems, for making life better. He started working on his dissertation proposal. He wanted to study differential equations with applications to medical imaging. He wanted his work to help doctors, to help people like his wife who had battled cancer. He wanted mathematics to serve humanity. Professor Whitmore agreed to be his dissertation advisor. "Your research proposal is excellent," the professor said. "This could be really important work that makes a difference." The janitor met with Professor Whitmore once a week to discuss his research. They worked together on problems. They debated approaches. They pushed each other to think deeper. It felt good to be challenged intellectually again. To work with someone who understood what he was trying to do, to collaborate on something meaningful. As the months passed, the janitor's confidence grew. He gave a presentation in one of his seminars. He published a short paper with Professor Whitmore. He helped a struggling undergraduate student finally understand calculus. His daughter came to visit him at his office one day. She looked around at the books on the shelves, the papers on the desk, the chalkboard covered with equations. "This is cool, Dad," she said. "You look happy here." The janitor realized she was right. He was happy, happier than he had been in years. He was doing what he was meant to do. He was being who he was meant to be. His wife noticed the change too. "You smile more now," she said one night. "You seem lighter, less burdened." "I am lighter," the janitor said. "I didn't realize how heavy it was carrying around all that unused potential, pretending to be less than I am." "You're not pretending anymore," his wife said. "You're free." She was right. He was free to be himself, free to use his gifts, free to chase his dreams, and it felt wonderful. 2 years passed. The janitor worked hard every day. He taught his classes. He studied for his own courses. He researched for his dissertation. Sometimes it was exhausting. Sometimes he wanted to quit. But he never did. He kept pushing forward. His dissertation was coming together. He had developed a new mathematical approach to analyzing medical images. His technique could help doctors detect tumors earlier. It could save lives. This was exactly the kind of work he had dreamed of doing. Professor Whitmore reviewed his work regularly. "This is excellent," he would say. "This is doctoral-level work. Actually, it's better than most doctoral work I've seen." In the spring of his 3rd year, the janitor prepared to defend his dissertation. This was the final step. He would present his research to a committee of professors. They would ask him questions. They would challenge his ideas. If they approved his work, he would earn his doctorate. The defense was scheduled for a Wednesday afternoon in May. The janitor barely slept the night before. He went over his presentation again and again. He anticipated every possible question. He wanted to be ready for anything. His wife took the day off work to attend. His daughter asked permission to miss school. "I want to see my dad become a doctor," she said. "Not a medical doctor, but a doctor of philosophy, a PhD." The defense was held in a large conference room. The committee sat at a table at the front. 5 professors. They would judge his work. They would decide his future. The room filled with people, students, faculty members. Even Dean Morrison came to watch. And in the back, sitting quietly, was Margaret, his old custodial supervisor. She had come to support him. The janitor saw her and smiled. She had given him a job when he needed one. She had treated him with dignity when he was just a cleaner. Now she was here to see him complete his journey. At exactly 2 o'clock, the defense began. The janitor stood at the front of the room. He clicked to his first slide. He took a deep breath. "Thank you all for being here," he began. "Today I will present my dissertation titled Advanced Differential Equation Methods for Early Tumor Detection in Medical Imaging." For the next hour, he presented his research. He explained his mathematical techniques. He showed his results. He demonstrated how his approach could be applied in real medical situations. The room was silent as he spoke. Everyone listened carefully. Some took notes. Some nodded as he made important points. His wife watched with tears in her eyes. His daughter looked proud. When he finished his presentation, the committee members began asking questions. They were tough questions, technical questions, questions designed to test his understanding. But the janitor was ready. He had spent 3 years preparing for this moment. Actually, he had spent his whole life preparing for this moment. He answered every question clearly. He defended his choices. He explained his reasoning. When a professor challenged one of his assumptions, he calmly explained why his approach was valid. When another professor suggested an alternative method, he discussed the pros and cons of each approach. The questions went on for 90 minutes. The janitor never faltered. He never got defensive. He just showed that he truly understood his work, that he had thought through every detail, that he deserved this degree. Finally, the committee chair said, "Thank you. That will be all for now. Please wait outside while we deliberate." The janitor stepped out of the room. His wife and daughter hugged him. Professor Whitmore patted his shoulder. "You did great," he said. "Really great." They waited in the hallway. 10 minutes passed. Then 20. The janitor paced back and forth. What were they discussing? What were they deciding? Had he made a mistake? Had he failed? After 30 minutes, the door opened. The committee chair stepped out. His face was serious. The janitor's heart sank, then the professor smiled. "Congratulations, doctor. You passed." The hallway erupted in cheers and applause. The janitor felt his legs go weak. He had done it. After 15 years, after so many obstacles, after so much doubt, he had finally earned his doctorate. His wife and daughter rushed to hug him. They were crying and laughing at the same time. Professor Whitmore shook his hand firmly. "I'm proud of you," he said. "So very proud." Dean Morrison came over. "Outstanding work. We're lucky to have you here." Even Margaret gave him a hug. "I knew there was something special about you," she said. "I could always tell." That evening, the mathematics department held a small celebration in the janitor's honor. They had cake and coffee. People gave speeches. They talked about his journey, about his perseverance, about how he inspired them. One of his students spoke. "You taught me that it's never too late to change your life, that circumstances don't define you, that if you have talent and determination, you can overcome anything." The janitor felt humbled by the kind words. He did not think of himself as inspiring. He had just done what he needed to do. He had just followed his dreams. But looking around the room, he realized his story did matter. It mattered to the struggling student who thought they were not smart enough. It mattered to the older person who thought they were too old to change careers. It mattered to anyone who felt invisible or overlooked. After the celebration, the janitor walked across campus one more time. It was a beautiful spring evening. The sun was setting. The trees were green. Students sat on the grass enjoying the warm weather. He thought about the path that had brought him here. The highs and lows, the sacrifices and rewards. It had not been easy, but it had been worth it. He thought about that night 3 years ago, when he stood in front of the chalkboard in room 301, when he picked up the chalk, when he decided to stop hiding. That one decision had changed everything. It had set in motion a series of events that led him here. To this moment. To this achievement, the janitor, no, the doctor, smiled to himself. He was not invisible anymore. He had been seen. He had been recognized. He had been valued. The next semester, he was offered a position as an assistant professor, a real faculty position, with a real salary, with an office and students and research funding. He accepted immediately. This was what he had always wanted, to teach, to research, to contribute to the world of mathematics. On his first day as a professor, he stood outside room 301. This was his classroom now. He would teach here. He would write equations on that same chalkboard where he had once written his life-changing solution. He entered the room. It was empty. The students had not arrived yet. He walked to the front and looked at the chalkboard. It was clean and green and ready for new knowledge. The professor picked up a piece of chalk. It felt familiar in his hand. He had held chalk countless times now, but this time felt special. This time he was not a janitor. He was not a teaching assistant. He was a professor, a doctor, a mathematician. He wrote his name on the board in clear letters. His actual name, the name that mattered, the name that represented who he truly was. Then he wrote underneath, "It is never too late to become who you are meant to be." Students started filing into the classroom. They sat down. They opened their notebooks. They looked at the board. They looked at him. "Welcome to Advanced Calculus," the professor said. "My name is on the board. Some of you may know my story. 3 years ago, I was cleaning this room. Today, I'm teaching in it. I tell you this not to brag, but to show you that transformation is possible. That change is possible. that dreams are possible. The students listened carefully. Some nodded. Some smiled. Mathematics is not just about numbers and equations, the professor continued. It's about problem solving. It's about persistence. It's about not giving up when things get difficult. Those lessons apply to life, not just math. He turned to the chalkboard and began writing the first equation of the semester. As he wrote, he felt complete. He felt whole. He was exactly where he was supposed to be. Years later, the professor would publish many papers. He would advise many doctoral students. He would receive awards for his teaching. He would make important contributions to the field of applied mathematics. But he never forgot where he came from. He never forgot the 3 years he spent pushing a cleaning cart through these hallways. He never forgot what it felt like to be invisible. He kept a photo in his office. It showed room 301 with his famous solution still on the board. Under the photo was a small plaque that read, "The moment everything changed." Students would ask about the photo. "What's the story there?" they would say, and the professor would smile and tell them. He would tell them about the night he solved an impossible equation, about the courage it took to stop hiding, about the second chance he had been given. "Never assume you know someone's full story," he would say. "Never assume that what you see is all there is. The janitor might be a genius. The waitress might be writing a novel. The security guard might be a poet. Everyone has hidden depths. Everyone has untapped potential." His students would nod and think about his words. Some would remember them forever. The professor's daughter grew up and went to medical school. She became a doctor, just like she had always wanted. When she graduated, she thanked her father in her speech. "My dad taught me that obstacles are not endings," she said. "They are just detours. He showed me that setbacks can become comebacks, that it's not where you start, but where you finish." The professor sat in the audience, tears streaming down his face. He was proud of his daughter. But more than that, he was grateful. Grateful for the journey. Grateful for the chance. Grateful for that one night when he chose to be brave. The campus that once did not see him now honored him. They named a scholarship after him. The scholarship went to non-traditional students. People returning to school after life had interrupted their education. People who had taken difficult paths. People who refused to give up on their dreams. The first recipient of the scholarship came to thank the professor personally. She was a single mother who had dropped out of college years ago. Now she was coming back to finish her degree. "Your story gave me hope," she said. "If you could do it, maybe I can too." "You can," the professor assured her. "You absolutely can," and she did. 2 years later, she graduated with honors. The professor worked at the university for many years. He touched countless lives. He inspired countless students. He proved that it is never too late, that dreams do not expire, that talent can wait patiently in the darkness until the right moment comes to shine. Sometimes late at night when the building was empty, the professor would walk the halls alone. He would remember those nights when he walked the same halls with a mop and bucket, when he was invisible. But he was not bitter about those years. He did not regret them. Those years had taught him humility. They had taught him compassion. They had taught him to see people for who they really are, not just what they appear to be. The professor would stop at room 301. He would turn on the lights. He would look at the chalkboard. And he would remember the night that changed everything. The night he picked up the chalk. The night he stopped being invisible. The night he became himself again. And every time he remembered, he would smile. Because that night had led to this life, this beautiful, full, meaningful life. The campus had fallen silent the day his solution was discovered. Silent with shock. Silent with wonder. Silent with the realization that they had been walking past greatness without seeing it. But the silence did not last. Soon the campus was filled with new sounds. Students learning. Professors teaching. Ideas flowing. Dreams growing. And at the center of it all was a man who had once been a janitor, who had once been invisible, who had once been overlooked, but who had always been a mathematician, who had always been brilliant, who had always been exactly who he was meant to be. He just needed one moment of courage to show the world. One equation, one solution, one night that changed everything.